when life falls apart, there's one verse that people often quote: all things work together for good. But when you're in real pain, that can sound hollow, even cruel. Are we really supposed to think every tragedy is secretly good? Well, what if this verse means something different? What if God's promises are deeper and far more hopeful than we even think? In this video, we're going to unpack what Romans 8:28 actually says. First, what the promise isn't. Second, what God is actually promising. And in particular, what the good really means for us. Because once you see it, this one passage can reframe every hard thing that's happened. So let's start with the verse. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him. So what isn't it saying? Well, firstly, this verse isn't suggesting that evil is actually good in disguise. So neither like the Buddhists or the Stoics do we need to try and persuade ourselves that horrendous evil is just an illusion or that we should be merely indifferent to it. Some suffering is horrific and unjust, and we can name it as such. But we aren't left to face it, as the secularists are, without hope of redemption. There is an answer coming, but more of that later. Okay, secondly, this verse is not just all about me. So whilst God's purposes are good for each of us individually, this promise is bigger than just us alone. So God is working all things towards one massive, coherent good for all believers, not just good things that are momentarily good for us as individuals. Okay, thirdly, this verse isn't a promise for everyone. We need to read on in the verse. The promise is for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. So this truth is a wonderful one, but it's given specifically for God's chosen children. So if it's not all about me and it's not about everyone, what is God promising? Okay, well, firstly, God is the one at work. Now, this verse isn't about karma or fate. Paul isn't suggesting here that the universe somehow balances itself, that if things have swung towards the bad, then they'll automatically swing towards the good next. That's a kind of cold, mechanical kind of hope. No, Christian hope is personal. Paul says someone is working, not a cosmic law, but our loving Heavenly Father. So every detail in your life rests in his hand. He isn't distant or detached. He's designing, he's engineering, and he's sustaining even the things that to us feel chaotic. So nothing happens by luck and nothing is wasted. When you can't see any pattern, God still sees the plan. Secondly, and this is super important, God works all things into good. Notice the verse doesn't say God works our successes into good or our slightly challenging things into good. No, rather it says God works all things. So if God says we're going to experience all things, we shouldn't be surprised when all things happen to us. And the previous verses have spoken of futility and decay and groaning and weakness. And it's those things, just as much as our victories, that God is working into good. Now, I can testify to this. So the previous 3 years for our family have felt like we've been facing a lot of all things. They've probably been the worst years of my life so far. And even now, once the dust is settling, I definitely don't have all the answers, but I'm beginning to see little chinks of how God was working my all things into good. Okay, thirdly, let's look more closely at what the good that God is promising really means. The next verse describes that good. It's for us to be conformed to the image of his Son. So the good isn't our comfort, it's our Christ-likeness. And it's the hard things that are most effective at achieving this. Now, on first thoughts, this might sound a bit like a consolation prize, especially when we're in the depths of our troubles. But actually, being recreated into Christ-likeness is spectacularly wonderful. God is restoring us to be his image bearers, fully reconciled to him. We'll be the people we were created to be. We'll reflect Christ's love and his purity and his wisdom and his joy. As C.S. Lewis puts it, if we let him, He will make the feeblest and filthiest of us into a god or goddess, dazzling, radiant, a bright stainless mirror which reflects back to God his own boundless power and delight. But we do need to consider one last thing about God's promise: the timing. Now, notice Paul never says when we'll see this good. He isn't promising every situation will turn out fine next week, or that we'll quickly see the purpose behind our pain. When he says God in all things works for the good, it literally means works into good, i.e. God's drawing every thread towards a final design that we can't yet see. And I think that's why faith often feels like waiting. In the middle of the process, in the fog of this fallen world, we rarely get all the answers. We want proof of the good by tomorrow, or at least by our own deadlines. But God's timing operates on a far bigger scale. With the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. God's not slow to keep his promises. He hasn't forgotten you. He's not late. He's simply working to a better calendar. So, if everything's falling apart for you right now, let's reflect on how this promise in Romans can give you hope. So firstly, trust that nothing is wasted. Even the hard moments are being worked into God's good plan. You may not see it yet, but no pain is meaningless when it lies in God's hands. And secondly, look forward with hope. One day God will complete his work, restoring what's broken and shaping us fully into the likeness of Jesus. Even when the present feels unclear, that future is certain. Every experience God gives us, every person he puts in our lives, is the perfect preparation for the future that only he can see. So when everything falls apart, God's promise still stands. But if you're still wondering why God does allow suffering, I made another video that might help. It's called I Don't Know Why God Allows Suffering, but I Know It's Not Pointless. You can watch it next. It builds on everything that we've just talked about.